Hello, hello. Welcome back, wonderful technologists. Welcome back to the podcast. I know I have been absent for the last week. Just, when life be lifing, you got to just take care of life, right? So, hope you guys are having an awesome week. It is starting to get warmer here in Illinois, finally, even though there are some days in the week that it's a little bit colder than others, but it is definitely good because I am ready for summer. So I hope you guys had a good Easter. I know my girls did. And, it was just a really nice day for Easter, which is surprising, especially at this time in Illinois. So, anyhow, I wanted to share on the podcast today a really good episode. I know I have talked before as far as how, I got into CT, how I advanced my career, and just the different ways on how I help new and beginner technologists when they're starting out in this field to get them up to speed, get them the basics, and to go out there and perform like you're a fucking expert. Okay. That is my goal. So, for some of you that might be new to this podcast and, a new listener, wherever you're listening from, I kind of wanted to share on this episode on how I became a successful CT technologist. Because I know I haven't really dived deep on just the things that have elevated me to become successful. So, first, how I became a successful CT technologist was a very trying road. There was a lot of struggles, a lot of just frustrations, a lot of anger, a lot of crying, a lot of everything to be the best technologist that I can be out there. So, one of the very first things is, how did I get interested in CT? You might be asking yourself. Well, at the time, after I graduated the X ray program, this was back in 2003. I started X ray school in 2001. So, I graduated in December of 2003. So, the early part of 2003, I had already been hired by the small community hospital that I worked at, that I did my training, and I just, did everything there. So we got hired after the first clinical rotation. So at that time, there was a high demand for X-ray techs, CT techs, because there was a real shortage at that time. So one of my supervisors had approached me. He was the supervisor of CT. He's still a very good friend of mine to this day. He asked me, he says, "Hey, we're looking for CT techs. You think you'd be interested in advancing and making more money?" And of course, I was in my 20s at that time, and I said, "Sure, why the hell not? Let me, go into another modalities. I can have some more letters after my name. Why not?" So I took it upon myself to go ahead and cross train. So they said, "This is what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and we're going to pay you to cross train so you can learn this quick, because we really need people on the shift and we really need you to get up to speed." Okay, sure, no problem. So I'm going in thinking, oh, well, they'll show me everything I need to know. I'll learn, I'll have all the education, thinking that it would be something similar to when I was in X-ray school. Well, lo and behold, it was not. There were no CT programs that existed at that time in the state that I lived in. Maybe other states, I'm not sure, but in the state I lived in, Nevada didn't have anything that existed like that. Everything you learned was on the job. Second thing, there were very few CT books out there. I think there was a registry review book that went through the A through Z of everything you needed to know on the test, maybe a cross-sectional anatomy book here and there. That's basically what you did. And there was really no framework, no guide, no outline, no step-by-step, no strategy, nothing to say, okay, this is where you're supposed to start. This is what you're supposed to learn. This is what you're supposed to do. So naturally, as a beginner, that's very freaking overwhelming, and it's very frustrating because you have to learn quickly so they can put you on the shift so that you can learn to take care of these patients, live patients, right? So it was a very scary ordeal for me, but I took it upon myself to say, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and invest in myself and try to be the best tech I can. Now, I remember sitting for the CT test. This was my first attempt. And I believe it was in 2006. So 3 years later, I said, oh, I can do this. I know what's going on. I know this modality. I can go ahead and pass this test. Well, lo and behold, I fucking failed miserably the first time around. Miserably. Like, I'm not even going to tell you what I got on that test because I was so ashamed. And naturally, when that happens, and I'm pretty sure anybody that's listening, it's probably happened to you because it happens more often than not, that when you take an advanced level test of that magnitude and you fail, it does something to you confidence wise. Like, okay, maybe I don't really know what I'm doing. Maybe I didn't study hard enough. Maybe I'm really not cut out to do CT. Those were all the thoughts that I had when it came to that big failure that I had. And people would say, no, listen, it's going to be okay. Just regroup. You're going to retake that test. Everything's going to be fine. Well, I wasn't okay with myself when it came to a test of that advancement. So what did I do? I said, you know what? Let me hold off a little bit. Let me kind of regroup, see what I wanted to do, and if I wanted to stay in this modality or not. So probably, I want to say about a year later, an opportunity comes by. And my supervisor says, hey, I am going to be the supervisor at this bigger hospital where you can gain more experience. Would you come with me? He goes, I plan on taking you and one other person. And I said, well, if I get a bump in pay, sure. He's like, but you got to take that CT test at some point. I said, okay. So I got approached, and I remember telling my previous manager at the small hospital I worked at, and I said, listen, I've been presented with this opportunity. They're giving me this much more in pay, which was a significant amount of pay. I think I was getting at that time, probably $5 more, which is a lot, if you really do the math, right? So they were like, oh, well, we'll offer you $1 more. And I said, nope, I'm out. So I left. And I decided to take another position, the same position, but at a bigger hospital with more acuity and more things that you see than in a regular small community hospital, right? So I went ahead and dove in deep. I said, okay, I'm going to be successful. I'm going to be just my all. I'm going to put in my blood, sweat, and tears so I know exactly how to operate in and out through CT. And I did. I was there at that hospital for 9 years. And in the first 5 years, I went ahead and just tackled it on and said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to operate. This is how I'm going to learn. I went to seminars. I took CE classes. I did all that stuff to really advance myself and be the best technologist I could be. Well, as things always change, my supervisor ended up leaving abruptly. There was a vacancy in that supervisor role, and they were trying to fill it with somebody that can really step into that role and really take on the job. So they asked me, hey, would you do it on an interim basis? Sure, no problem. I think I can do it. If it's interim, sure, I can, make it work. So there was a lot of things that I did not know about being in a supervisor's position because naturally it's a stage of management. I had no fucking clue. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. But the positive part is that my director at the time, which I absolutely just am grateful for that man, he said, okay, we'll send you to some leadership classes. You need to know stuff about management? I'll send you here. And I was grateful for that because at least I can learn how to do things. And I would ask for help. Like I had to do payroll and I had to do all these other things, as a supervisor and check email and go to meetings and still scan as a tech and all this stuff, right? So knowing that, it really just gave me another sense of opportunity and say, okay, I can lead people and really just make an impact so I can make them see that they can become better techs, just to make them realize that, right? Well, lo and behold, I still had to take the CT test. I still hadn't done that because I was really just on the negative fence on that. However, the criteria for ARRT was changing, so I was forced to take that test. So I said, okay, it's 2010. We got to get on this. Like, I got to do this. So I did. I took a good 3-4 months to study because I really needed to dive in and really needed to do the time and really honed in on all the things that I said, okay, I'm going to pass this test. Lo and behold, I did. I think I got like an 87% on the test, if I remember. So I went ahead and passed it because then the next year they were changing the criteria where all the CQR was starting to become the norm. So don't hate me since, all my certifications are before CQR. So, so I'm pretty sure you old school techs are the same way. So as I was going into that supervisor role, and we did have a supervisor at the time being, however, this person ended up not working out due to some other things that had happened. So my director and the associate administrator who was above my director, they both approached me and said, listen, we know you did a good job as the interim. Why don't you permanently take this position? And I said, listen, I don't know what it is you expect out of me, but I don't really feel like I did a good job. Well, they gave me all the things and showed me proof on how I did such a good job. Well, considering I made the schedule and when it came to call, most of the techs took all the call that I did because I would take more call in the department. Most of the techs would pick up a lot of shifts. Like there was a lot of shifts to offer. And a lot of times I would just sign myself up and they'd like, no, we'll do this. If there were call offs, they said, hey, I'll come in. Hey, I noticed this shift is vacant. Can I take it? Hey, you're signed up for call. I really need the money. So I really didn't have a problem filling these shifts because I respected these techs and because I didn't have the classic management role. I was a technologist on that floor scanning just like everybody else. And I think more the techs that were under me, which were about 12 techs under me, they respected that so much that when it came to filling shifts, to doing this, to doing that, and I barely had any call offs, they were there and said, hey, I'll go ahead and do this. And I made everything fair for them. Like when it came to holidays, you sign up for whatever you want. You sign up for whatever call you want. I made it fair. So that's why they were like, please do this. And even the technologists are like, please do this. And I said, okay. So I went ahead and did that supervisory role. I mean, I was there at the hospital for 5 years. I did it for another, 4.5 years. And then I remember I had gotten married in that process. I became a mom. And with the birth of my first daughter, there was a lot of medical challenges and medical complexities where she needed more of my time. So, and there was a shift in management where things at the hospital that I was at were not going really good. So it was time for me to reevaluate. Do I stay in this management position or do I do what's best for my family and take another position that is less taxing on me? Well, I made the conscious decision because of being a new mom and I had a medically complex child. I decided to take a job at the VA because they were building a new hospital in Las Vegas. And it would be another opportunity for me to just really see that side of how VA hospitals operate. So I can tell you that when I went to the VA, I had started working at the Air Force Base Hospital because the new hospital hadn't been built yet. And they actually needed a technologist out there because the VA was on site there at the Air Force Base Hospital. So I said, okay, it was a very scary experience for me. I have never worked with the active military ever in my lifetime. And I said, this is like another stepping stone into my career. Why don't I do it and why don't I take it? So I said, you know what? Why not? So I said, yes. So of course, we all know that the VA process, it takes a very long time to get in because they go through a full security clearance to make sure that you don't have any bad shit in your record. Telling you, it took 5 months before I was like, okay, they're ready to work and everything. I have to say, working along those folks at Nellis Air Force Base was one of the most just amazing, best times of my career. I cannot say enough about these folks. Now, the way they structure their radiology program, their x-ray program, is a little bit different than what we do, because they actually have to cross-train x-ray techs into CT because they have to cover both modalities. And they rotate, their personnel all the time because they're always changing assignments. But I can tell you, I still talk to some of them to this day. It is one of the best times in my career that I've ever had. And I learned so much from them, and they learned so much from me. It is absolutely amazing. If you guys ever get the opportunity to work alongside the military, please take that chance. It is so refreshing to know how they operate and how they do things as a civilian, and they get to learn from you too. They get to learn how we do things on the outside, because sometimes, they retire or they leave and they have to actually operate out there in the world. Tell you, it was one of the best things. However, once I switched over to the hospital after it was built and I left Nellis, I can honestly say I was working more than I was working at the previous hospital I was at. It was a new hospital. There was a ton of call. They were trying to figure out how they were going to staff. Like, everything just did not make sense, right? But it was nice because you got to work with brand new equipment, brand new hospital, brand new everything. It was something that I am super grateful for, that I was there to have that experience, right? Well, as time went on, as my ex-husband wanted to move to Illinois to be closer to his family. Now, it's not that I wanted to leave Nevada, because I did not, but at that time, we felt it was the right choice for our kids, and decided to do that, where I landed my first job at the county hospital in Chicago, downtown. And I tell you, it was a different experience for me, because the way they do things, especially in a hospital in another state versus how they do things in Nevada, totally different. Like, I had to learn their processes and everything. It's not that I couldn't sit down and scan, because absolutely I can sit down and scan. That wasn't the problem. It's just learning their policy, procedures, and how they do things, which is a lot different than your regular, nonprofit hospital. County is a different kind of animal, I tell you. But I learned so much from those old school techs, and just how they do things. And I'll tell you, I suck the knowledge out of those guys. They are wonderful, and they have been there, 20, 30 years, because those county jobs, you just don't leave. So naturally, I was recommended by a coworker. There was a management position, because he knew I was in management before, and said, hey, I think you would be good to lead this team at a sister hospital. Okay. So I decided, hey, why not? Let me just apply for it. Let's see what happens. And at the time, I was pregnant with my last child. So I got an interview. I interviewed with the director. They asked me when I can start. And I said, well, I would need probably a few months. And I said, because I'm pregnant. And he says, oh my goodness, I didn't notice it. I guess I hid it very well, because it was during the winter time, but I was due in a couple months, because it was February. And I said, I need like at least a few months before I can start, because I am pregnant. And they were like, oh, okay. And so I just thought, okay, well, I'm pregnant, I'm about to have a baby. Nothing's going to come of this. Well, lo and behold, the director calls me several hours after I had my daughter and says, would you mind sending me, a copy of your, X-ray and CT license, and make sure that I have all your degrees? So I'm thinking, okay, well, why would he want that? Well, the next day I get a call, get an offer for the job, as far as money, this and that. And I'm like, okay, well, this will give me more time with my kids because, I will be working less hour, not taking a call, not doing anything, right? Well, needless to say, I went ahead and took the position, and it was a very challenging position because this department needed a lot of help, a lot of restructuring, and a lot of guidance to get them to where they need to be. In a year's time, I really turned it around, got their schedule right, did everything, and got those techs on board to make sure that, hey, this is how we do things, and there are consequences when you don't do the right thing. Well, because obviously I was good at my job. I knew how to not only jump in and scan and go ahead and do things, but I learned so much about mammography, nuclear medicine, ultrasound, just working there. Like as far as mammo with the BIRAD systems, the letters, and, digitizing films is something that I've never learned before. And I tell you, I learned so much more because I asked a lot of questions, and I asked because I needed to know all the aspects of radiology when I'm going to manage it as a whole, right? I knew X-ray and CT, but I didn't know all the other parts. I knew MRI, of course, because I've always interacted with MRI techs all the time, and I always ask them questions. But all the other parts I needed to know. I knew how to operate IR because we work so closely with IR all the freaking time, especially when we do biopsies, right? But all the other modalities, I had no clue. So I had to learn how to operate it. Well, because I knew my job so well, and because the techs respected me and I got things done, for the next fiscal year's budget, my position was eliminated by the director. And when I questioned it, it was, well, I'm not sure why that happened and this and that. No, I can tell you, and these are just assumptions. It's because I knew the job better than he did. And that's not to take a stab at anybody, but it's really disappointing when you have somebody who's strong and that can lead your team so you can focus on other things, on how to make sure that we have equipment, make sure we have this, make sure we have that if we need additional staff, that they would be there to support you instead of eliminating their position, which fucking pissed me off. But I said, you know what? I know what to do, what's best for me. I can go back to being a tech and making probably a little bit more money and knowing what I do best. So that's exactly what I did. Is I started searching for another job. I started working for a hospital that was funded through the state. And it's one of the most popular universities in Chicago. Not the University of Chicago, if you guys are thinking of that, not that one. And it was very eye-opening. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed working there. But at the time, I was also going through a divorce. I was trying to navigate co-parenting and trying to navigate all these things as far as divorce and just trying to be present in being in a positive space for my kids, where I ended up taking another job somewhere else and ended up fucking getting fired from that job because I was not present. I was missing all kinds of days, and I got fired for attendance. In 23 years as a tech, I've never been fired for attendance or never been disciplined for attendance. It's because I was going through a very hard time. I was going through this divorce, and I really needed to get in that space where I can regroup and I can really figure who I really was. So fast forward to today, where I have 5 years in at the trauma hospital that I work in. I have to say that my divorce was a blessing in disguise. And I know you may agree or disagree. It was a blessing in disguise because I wouldn't be as successful as I am today doing the things that I do in a trauma hospital. I give my all when I go into work, and I leave that shit at the door, okay? Because working in a trauma environment, it is very physically and mentally exhausting. I have to say that working in a trauma hospital is probably one of the most exciting things because you get to see a lot of different things. And ever since I started working there, that's when I really had the idea of not only my successes as a good CT technologist that is successful, how can I impact and pass this on to those new technologists, those beginners, so they can be the best that they can be? That is the whole reason why I created my CT Educator coaching program, so I can show you and mentor you through those difficult times, those challenging times, and get you to be the best technologist you can. Get you the basics. And so, when you sit down at that scanner, you have the fucking confidence to not only show up for your patients, execute quality patient care, and get those optimal exams. So, if you're interested in joining my program, there is a link below in the show notes on how to fill out an application to the program to make sure you're a good fit. It is a 6-month long coaching and mentoring program where I go in and I give you certain strategies on how we're going to assess your training, assess the gaps on where you need help, and build real goals that you can achieve to get to where you need to be. So I hope that this episode was insightful on how I became a successful CT tech. Always, if you have any questions, comments, whatever, send me an email. Everything will be on the show notes. Give me a follow on Instagram. Let's chat over on Instagram. I always post pretty good reels and even the video clips of this podcast on Instagram. So if you're interested in joining the program, fill out the application, and I will get back to you in 48 to 72 hours to make sure you're a good fit for the program. I am kicking off a 3-day launch as well to kick off the launch of this CT Educator coaching program. It's going to be in the next 2 weeks. Make sure you check out the show notes. Get on that email list so you know exactly when this launch is happening. It is a Be the Go-To CT Tech Challenge. I give you certain parts of step-by-step on how to be that go-to CT Tech and how to be successful in it. So thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I will chat with you guys in the next one.